Hi, and welcome to this short briefing about the parking brake system. This WIN video aims at helping operators to avoid the misuse of the parking brake system. The presentation will focus on how to implement some best practices during the parking SOPs when using the parking brake. This will be explained in two parts. At first, we will describe the use of the chocks versus the use of the parking brake. And in the second part, we will discuss about the appropriate technique to apply the parking brake at the gate. So let's start with the use of chocks. As per standard operating procedures, Airbus recommends the use of the parking brake before pushback or start or during parking procedures. However, when available, the chocks should be used in order to prevent the exposure of the parking brake system to high temperatures when the brakes are hot. In general, it is recommended that the parking brake is released at the gate after chocks are installed and when temperatures are above 300 degrees with fans off or 150 degrees with fans on. Above 500 degrees with fans off or 350 degrees with fans on, the effect of the high temperatures is more critical. Therefore, the parking brake application should be avoided to prevent brake damage unless operationally necessary. As a matter of fact, applying the parking brake when the brakes are hot can damage the parking brake pistons, resulting in hydraulic fluid degradation. If this happens, it will form the so-called black aggregate inside the brake pistons. This can cause a dragging brake effect. So, when the operational conditions permit, the operators should prefer the use of the chocks at the gate. It is also important to highlight that having the parking brake not engaged has limited benefits in terms of brake cooling. So please remember that the most important advantage to the use of the chocks versus the use of the parking brake is to avoid damage to the parking brake system due to the hot temperatures on the brakes. Our next subject is the technique for parking brake application. Now, to illustrate this technique, the following video sequences will display three different scenarios. One in which the pilot is applying the parking brake correctly as per SOP, and two others in which there is a risk of unwanted aircraft movement. Let's take a look at them and see if you can identify the differences. Did you notice what changed from scene to scene? Let's discuss them in detail. In all scenarios, we observe a pilot who, after arriving at the gate, applies the parking brake to stop the aircraft before engine shutdown. This is the beginning of the parking SOP. Now, the first common action is that the pilot uses the brake pedals to make the aircraft stop. Then, through the eyes of the pilot, we see that in every scenario, he checks that the accumulator's pressure is in the green band. After verifying that there is sufficient pressure in the accumulator, we see that the pilot uses the parking brake handle to engage the parking brake. Then, we see in the first scenario that the pilot releases the brake pedals immediately after setting the parking brake to on. In the second scenario, we see through the pilot's eyes that he rapidly checks that the brake pressure indications on the triple pressure indicator start to build up immediately after setting the parking brake to on. And in the third scenario, the pilot does the same, but he waits until the brake pressure indications are above the green band. Last, in scenarios 2 and 3, the pilot releases the brake pedals immediately after checking the brake pressure. What scenario do you believe is the correct one? Going through each of them, we observe that in scenario 1, the flight crew does everything he's supposed to do except for one step that is an essential step of the technique for the application of the parking brake. This essential step is the check of the brake pressure after setting the parking brake to on to confirm that the parking brake selector valve opened correctly and that sufficient hydraulic pressure is provided to the brakes before releasing the brake pedals. This step is important because not doing it or doing it incorrectly can add the risk of unwanted aircraft movement after parking brake application. In our first scenario, it is possible that the pilot forgot to perform this check, or he just did not do it, thinking that the parking brake was correctly engaged. Instead, the pilot decided to take the feet off the pedals rapidly. However, if a failure of the parking brake selector valve occurs in this scenario, and as a result this valve opens slowly or does not open, there may not be enough pressure to stop the aircraft and unwanted aircraft movement can occur. In our second scenario, the pilot did check the pressure briefly, and when he saw a positive response to the parking brake engagement, he did not wait until the pressure went above the green band and released the brake pedals before reaching a sufficiently safe pressure. But here, we were able to observe that the pressure on the left and right brake pressure indication builds up very slowly towards the green band, a sign of parking brake selector valve slow opening. Although the pressure on the brakes appears to start to increase correctly, if he releases the brake pedals before the brake pressure reaches the green band, the pressure may not be sufficient to hold the aircraft in its position. Finally, in the third scenario, the pilot completed the same step as the second, but here the pilot checked that the pressure on the brakes after parking brake application was sufficient before he released the brake pedals. The correct technique is the one from scenario number 3, that is also described in the FCOM in the parking SOP. It is the only procedure that will guarantee that the aircraft remains fully secured in its parking position at all times. It is important to highlight that the flight crew must apply any OEB or refer to any tab related to the use of the parking brake when applicable, in addition to this recommended technique. So, to conclude this wind video, let's review one more time the two main messages of this video. The first one is that the use of chocks is recommended when operating the brakes at high temperatures as an alternative to the parking brake, but the decision to use them will be the result of the flight crew's assessment of the operational conditions. The second one is about the correct application of the parking brake technique at the gate in order to prevent events of unwanted aircraft movement. So, we arrive at the end of this presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that you found this video clear and helpful. See you soon in another wind video.